best intentions can have unpredictable outcomes. How will this housing development look in 20 years' time? And what about these newly planted trees? Or the reverse effect, when forests are harvested or farming activities change? What about wind farms? Will they be an elegant part of the landscape or a blot on it? What will be the impact of new factories, roads or power stations? All over the world, people seek answers to such questions, and yet they often feel powerless with no real influence over decisions about their environment. These seem to be taken by anonymous parties, governments or committees, and appear simply to be imposed from above. More and more we are being told to act sustainably, but it's often difficult to understand how our actions will contribute to global changes.
We cannot go on taking more out of the planet than we put back, and that's locally and globally. So we clearly do have to find ways of developing the future that is balanced, that ensures that we don't just take out, that we keep putting back, that we do things that are renewable, that don't just demean the planet or devalue the planet. I think people have said that we're actually using the equivalent of 3 planets worth of resources at the moment. But if you don't know what sustainable development is, using 3 planets worth of resources is clearly unsustainable.
It's extremely important to understand the way in which communities and people interact with the environment. One of the definitions I've heard of sustainable development is to manage the planet as though we intend to stay. If the planet was scaled to the size of a football, then the Earth's crust is about the thickness of a postage stamp. So everything we do and that happens in that very thin layer at the surface of the planet. It wasn't until we got shots from space that we began to see the planet as a single object and our role, our size in it, really.
Communities which may be affected by significant environmental changes could be more closely involved in the decision-making process. But to do that effectively, they need a more realistic idea of how their world might look. There are many ways of doing this: photographs, plans, drawings, and the idealized artist's impressions, but none of them actually takes you into the landscape. They're flat, static, and not at all interactive. 3D images can give a better idea of change, but once again, looking at an on-screen model doesn't come close to the actual experience of being in the landscape, or being able to respond to and interact with it. What's needed is a flexible, more realistic system which puts viewers at the heart of the visualization and allows them to explore various options. And that's exactly what's been developed by researchers here at the Macaulay Institute in Scotland. They've been investigating the effectiveness of different methods of public participation. As a result, people now have the opportunity to view, debate, and offer informed opinions about their future landscape in a way never before possible. This breakthrough uses a piece of new technology, the Virtual Landscape Theatre, or VLT. The researchers collate electronic maps and plans, aerial and ground-based photographs, and use this information to create a realistic 3D model of the existing landscape.
We've been developing these techniques with a number of international collaborators, groups in Switzerland, Sweden, Norway, the Netherlands, Germany. Each has been developing particular technical or application aspects, and we've drawn on those experiences to develop our own facility for Scottish conditions.
The virtual landscape is not just a computer representation on a screen. It is about landscapes of the future. These are choices that we have to make as a society, and the landscape theatre provides an environment that helps us to think about what the future options are and gives people an opportunity to express their thoughts, preferences and opinions.
We can create models for almost anywhere using standard data sets and standard approaches. We build in particular features which might be unique to a location, but we can apply the techniques more or less in any location.
In the virtual landscape theatre, the model is projected onto a curved screen to give viewers a seamless, all-round view. This lets you walk, drive, or even fly around the landscape. It's dynamic, easy to manipulate, and allows viewers to explore various options of their choice. This resembles the experience that's familiar to players of virtual reality games. They can control it, introduce proposed new features, or change it. For example, they can make new wind turbines bigger or smaller, change their position, multiply, or reduce their numbers. Those taking part can examine the visual impact from any angle they choose, in daylight, at dusk, at night, in the fog or driving rain. They can see not only how things are now, but how they might be in the future, and experience the visual impacts of alternative developments. But best of all, it offers the ability to experiment.
Changing aspects of the design there on the spot could help people see that there are alternatives.
Well, I think it's an outstanding example of the use of technology, because especially when you're working with the public in a kind of public participation exercise, to be able to get on a large scale so that people can actually see changes over time, that's really brilliant. Then you can switch it off, go back, change some of the parameters and do it again, and people can very quickly grasp what it is that you're talking about in a way that words and reports can never do.
The virtual landscape theatre is quite magical actually. You sit and you feel surrounded by the environment, which indeed is very, very familiar to me. It reminds me a little bit of being in an IMAX theatre, and that for me is very realistic.
It's not like seeing a simulation on a small screen. This is much more like being there. But participants can quickly transform the landscape from the present into simulated possible futures.
Oh, I thought that the virtual landscape theatre was fantastic. First of all, it's very dynamic, it's real, and it gives you a lot of opportunities as a researcher to set up different scenarios. So I am very impressed with this potential.
One of the best things about the landscape theatre is the feeling that you're almost in the landscape and travelling through it. I think the sense that it reflects more what humans see naturally out in the landscape itself is one of its best features.
So it presents information in a highly accessible way. Users can take control of the virtual environment and do the exploring themselves. This helps with learning, provides material for debate and discussion, and encourages people to share their opinions. But that's not all. The theatre also provides the means to express those opinions using an electronic voting system. We all feel differently about expressing ourselves in public. Some are outspoken, others silent. Some simply want to give what they perceive as the correct answer. The voting system lets everyone vote the way they really want to, because voting is anonymous and everyone's opinion is equally valued. Handsets let individuals say whether they like or dislike each option. So they're not just able to make and visualize the changes, the voting system provides instant feedback on levels of agreement or disagreement within the group. No one knows who's voted for what, but the results reveal the group's preferences, which are used to stimulate more discussion and identify alternative proposals.
I don't think you should give the idea that people can look at these options and vote and then that's them decided. I think like any consultation process, it is about getting opinions and balancing them. But what I do hope it will do is help people to feel that they have a real input and that the decision that is taken at the end is one that they have had an opportunity to shape and that is perhaps different from what it would have been if they hadn't taken part.
Well, the voting system enables us to record people's answers to set questions, and that might provide us with quantitative information, might provide us with one or two facts associated with place names, and it can provide a limited amount of descriptive information as well. But the theatre and the voting system is not intended as a decision-making facility and forum. It's to enable discussion, which then leads to outcomes, and decisions might be one of those outcomes, but they may not be decisions made in the theatre.
I think the voting system is absolutely excellent. It means that everyone can participate, rather than just those who are bold enough to put their hands up and speak.
Oftentimes we run into a very vocal person or two who seems to dominate the conversation that goes on. And many times the other people in the group, we have the feeling that other people do not feel that way necessarily. This gives you a way to really gauge that, I think, and that seems very interesting and helpful.
The information that's gathered isn't restricted to aesthetics or feel-good factors. It ranges over wider social issues. People can articulate their priorities for their community: jobs, housing, roads, environment, quality of life, opportunities for the future. They can voice their thoughts on work prospects, recreation, crime prevention and control. They can express exactly what they feel, from the type of trees they prefer to the pros and cons of the siting of a new supermarket development.
Well, I thought it was great. I think it's partly also bringing democracy, I think, right down to a local level, and using new technology to take it right to the citizen, get them involved in the decision making at a very local level.
I mean, the whole planning process is very difficult. People tend to have a suspicion that somehow or other the developers will get their way and that the people don't really count and consultation is phony. Even to the state, if a developer presents a plan, a visualization, there's a suspicion that somehow or other it's done for the benefit of the developer and is not always fair and objective. If you can have something that's academic, that's independent, that's authentically saying this is actually what it will look like, and how do you feel about it, and will not necessarily give people the right of veto, but the right to be able to comment, the right to be able to look at different ways of doing it and express their preference, or if you want to put it the other way, the least worst option, then I think people will start to see that this is actually a very worthwhile exchange. It does give them real influence, and hopefully you'll have a much more real sense that people can participate.
The theatre allows researchers and decision makers to find out what's really valued in the landscape and what isn't. It's by exploring the informed opinions of those directly affected by proposed changes that planners can improve the quality of the decision-making process and ultimately deliver more imaginative solutions. All of which is fine. But how do we get members of the public involved in this process when many of them lead busy lives or have other barriers to overcome? How can they be persuaded to come and take part? That's another challenge which is overcome by the VLT. It's been designed so that it can be taken to the people, whoever or wherever they are. It's research in action, an interesting and highly valuable facility which works with people to produce practical results. It confronts issues such as social exclusion and equal opportunities head-on and encourages genuine participation. The theatre is continually being developed in collaboration with partners in research, planning and communities, and looks set to become widely adopted.
The fact that the theatre is mobile is very important to me because I haven't got the time to go too far away from home. This journey today was 5 minutes for me. I've spent 2 hours here very willingly. If I'd had to go too far away, I wouldn't have made the effort.
Well, I love the virtual landscape theatre. I think it's a marvelous way of kind of presenting people with various landscapes, and I want one myself.
We would love to have our own virtual landscape theatre, certainly. Who wouldn't?
The research being done at the Macaulay with the VLT has clearly shown its value. Communities can now not only be offered a more realistic idea of how their world might look, they can become more closely involved in the decision-making process. Nothing else offers such a unique opportunity for us to have a say in how our future environment will evolve.
I think the virtual landscape theatre is an exciting tool. Will help communities and policy planners work together better.
It's in a different league from what went before. It has taken the whole technology forward. We're in different territory now.